Hi, I'm with Kent Summers, who's the Director of Performing Arts and Sports here at the National Federation of State High School Associations. Probably the thing that's most immediately germane to Kent's role with our activities is that he's involved with the Speech, Debate, and Theater Association. So thanks, Kent, for joining us.
It's great to
If
be
you could
here.
start by explaining a little bit about what it is you do at NFHS, what your job is.
Sure. As Director of Performing Arts and Sports, I have a varied position. My background actually is in the performing arts, a music person from the get-go. I, though, am here at the NFHS. I work with the areas of speech, debate, and theater. I work with the area of music. I'm also the rules editor for boys lacrosse and also work with girls lacrosse. And most recently, I've been appointed now to work with the area of spirit, which is cheerleading and dance.
So how do you keep that all in balance?
Well, it's kind of an interesting task, I guess. You get an email or a phone call or something, and you're not sure what it's going to pertain to, and so you're not sure which hat you ought to be wearing when you pick the phone up or when you open that email. But it's been it is a little bit of a challenge to go back and forth between the various activities that I work with, because they are really varied.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Speech, Debate, and Theater Association, where it's come from and where it's at now?
Sure. The Speech, Debate, and Theater Association, I'm not, because I've been in this position now about 8 years, but I believe it started probably sometime in the late 80s is when it was developed. And at that time, National Federation, had determined that maybe we needed some type of an organization to provide our state associations and their officials, especially their officials, with an insurance program so that they were covered when they were working basketball games, football games, lacrosse games, whatever it might be. And so that organization was determined that it was needed, an officials association, to provide that liability insurance for officials. But they also saw that maybe it was needed for coaches, and then also for music directors and speech, debate, and theater directors as well, because they all have some liability and exposure in working with students, and so it was a need that was seen, and so it was developed back in, I believe, in the late 80s is when it was first developed.
So how has it grown from there in terms of professional development and other services? What does it now do for a member?
It has changed quite a bit over the years as far as the benefits and professional development and so on. It has really a whole lot more benefits now than it did when it first started, and actually the fee is probably about the same as it was when it first was developed back in the late 80s. It's a $20 membership fee, and for that, the benefits that you get, of course, the main one is the liability insurance coverage, which currently is $1 million of excess liability insurance coverage. That covers the director anytime they're traveling with their team, anytime they're working with students before or after school. The only time it is not in place, really, when working with kids is during that school day, and typically teachers have some type of insurance that covers them during that school day time. Now, one caveat to that would be that it does cover during the school day if you're not in your regular teaching environment. So if you're out with your team during the school day at a speech tournament or whatever it might be, it would be in place at that point.
Great. So one of the things that I think not everybody understands unless they've had direct contact with MFHS is the relationship between the national body and the state associations, and in the case of speech, debate, theater, music, sometimes affiliate associations.
Correct.
Can you unpack that a little bit for the class and explain
how
that works?
And it is somewhat complicated in that we have about half of our state associations. The NFHS, our main members are the 51 state high school athletic and activities associations throughout the country. About half of them are athletic only. Another half are athletics and activities. And so in those states where the state association has jurisdiction with the activities, then that would be a place that the directors would turn for guidance, for that's where the rules would come from. All of those types of things would be in place in those states that have activities under their jurisdiction. But about half of them don't have. And in those states, usually it's probably a statewide forensic association that might have jurisdiction, whoever probably runs the statewide tournaments in those various states. And so I'm assuming that, we believe that most every state has, some type of an organization that does administer, but in some states we don't have real good conduit with them, and so it's, we're not even certain probably who does it in those states.
So the state associations ultimately have jurisdiction over the rules that they apply at their competitions. Then what role, if any, does NFHS play when it comes to rules for those activities?
Very good question. NFHS has been involved in mainly non-athletic activities, speech, debate, theater, music, since the late 70s. And at that time, when the NFHS began to be involved in the activities, it was kind of up in the air where we would go, what types of things we would really do with those activities once we brought them in. And so kind of the original thought was that maybe we ought to develop some national rules that would govern statewide events, and invitational events, that kind of thing, all of the speech events that happen, and music events, because that's what we do in the sports area. We write rules for high school sports. That's kind of the major function of the office, actually. So that was felt that maybe that's what we needed to do. Well, it became apparent that, we've been doing this for a long time. All the states had told us that, and so as a result, we moved away from that pretty quickly. So in answer to your question, we really don't have any involvement in rules, either, just playing rules that would occur during tournaments, but certainly nothing on eligibility as well. That's all done at the state level.
So if somebody comes to you with an eligibility question, for example, or a rules question, you're going to refer them down to a state association?
We would have to, because with 51 different states and each of them having different eligibility rules, we don't really know for sure what each of the individual states does as far as eligibility is concerned. We have to refer them to the state, and we have, as a federation, the way we're organized, we really don't have any jurisdiction to do so.
Right. Now, one of the things that this course is obviously representative of is professional development.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of resources does a new coach get, or frankly a veteran coach get, from STTA?
Yeah, those are the other benefits that are in place, and those have really grown remarkably, I think, over the last just recent years, 2 or 3 years. We have for a number of years marketed and sold at a very reasonable rate 31 booklets that are on all kinds of different specific topics, many of them dealing with debate, but we do have one theater booklet that deals with one-act play. We've got a number that deal with kind of the individual speech events, forensics, and so on. And just a number of really good titles, and they're just, probably in the order of, say, 15 to 25 pages in length, not really lengthy, but lengthy enough to get into the topic pretty well. And those have always been marketed. Well, recently, we have determined that should be a member resource, and so what we've done is we have put all of those 31 booklets on the NFHS website behind the login, so that you have to be a member in order to access them. But once you're a member, you can access those booklets, you can read the booklets online, and they're done in a software called 3D Issue, which really makes it easy to read, but also easy to print. And we encourage folks to print those booklets and copy if needed for classroom use. Use them however they would like. They are copyrighted, but we have granted permission for members to use them however they want.
It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people associate with NFHS when it comes to speech, debate, and theater is the debate annual topic selection.
Sure.
I think a lot of people get their first exposure to the association through that. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how it works?
Sure. To be honest, to go back historically a bit, when the NFHS back in the late 70s became involved in speech, debate, and theater, it was identified pretty early on that was maybe a place that we could provide a service to the schools, the state associations, by facilitating that topic selection process. And so as a result, the NFHS did become involved in it in the late 70s. Up to that point, it was A number of different organizations, I think, had some input into it, and anyway, but we kind of took that in and began to work with that process. It is for policy debate only. The other topics for public forum, for Lincoln Douglas debate, those are all done usually through, I think the NFL is the one that facilitates that selection process, but for policy debate, we are the ones that do it. Process begins really at the previous year's meeting, where we identify some potential topics for the following year's meeting, and then we'll have folks that will volunteer to write papers, very, very extensive papers actually, on each of those topics. And they'll submit those papers. We'll then distribute those papers to the folks that would be attending the following year. There's a review process that occurs, and all of that to make sure that those papers are going to be good and complete, so that it covers kind of the negative and the affirmative positions. And then we'll get together and have a meeting, and out of that meeting then 5 will come out of that meeting as potential topics for the following school year. Then through the fall, we have a 2-step selection process that occurs, where schools have the opportunity to weigh in and vote and narrow down from 5 to 2, and then a final balloting process that then will select the topic. It'll be announced then in early January each year.
Great. So if I'm a new coach, and a lot of the people who will be watching this class are going to be new coaches, and I experience a problem, maybe it's with rules interpretation, or maybe just I need some advice on how to deal with a particular aspect of my job that I've never encountered before.
Sure.
Who should I reach out to? Where should I begin?
Well, again, it varies by state because of the unique nature of each of the states. But probably the first step would be to determine if your state activities or athletic association has any jurisdiction. And if it's an activities association, they probably do. However, caveat here, some of the state associations really, they may have jurisdiction over it, but they really don't run those tournaments. It's actually run maybe by the Forensic Association, and they just kind of grant them authority to do that. So probably the first step in most any state would be to talk to an experienced speech debate teacher that maybe that you have met through other affiliations, and try to determine who they would say would be the first person to contact. It may be someone with the Forensic Association, it may be somebody in the actual state office, and so that would be my suggestion, would be to find someone who's been around a while and has worked with the state network, and they can tell you who to contact. They may be able to answer the question themselves.
Now, a lot of the people that will be coming to forensics and debate coaching may have gone through a formal experience in college or high school, but they may not have. And many may come to it through theater.
Yes,
they may be
sure.
approaching it from that aspect. Maybe they started as a theater director and have now picked up individual events. Or maybe they're approaching NFHS just because they're interested in theater.
Sure.
What do you see the relationship between NFHS and theater? Because it's not something we talk about as much.
That's right, and it's usually, theater so often is just performance at school. And so as a result, we don't have any involvement, nor would the state associations have any jurisdiction over just a performance of a musical, of a play, just using students at the school. There's no competition involved, there's no evaluation really involved, and so as a result, no one really has jurisdiction over it other than the local school administrators. So the only time that really we become involved in theater events would be probably at a speech tournament that includes theater events. For example, one-act play, I mentioned that earlier, that we have a booklet that's available on one-act play, so that would certainly be an area that is competitive, and state associations would have jurisdiction, or the Forensic Association would have jurisdiction. Reader's Theater would be certainly another that would be considered a theater event that would have jurisdiction, because again, that typically would be a competitive event.
Now, you have some relationships, or NFHS has relationships with some other professional associations.
Yes, we do.
That deal with theater and forensics. Can you talk about that relationship a little
Sure. We have a very good working relationship with 2 national organizations, the National Forensic League, NFL, which of course conducts the qualifying and national tournament throughout the spring and early summer each year. And very good working relationship with them. Another would be the Educational Theater Association, known as EDTA, and certainly EDTA is another one that we have a very good working relationship with. Representatives from those two organizations sit as ex officio members of our speech advisory committee, and we work very closely with them and have very good communication with both organizations.
You mentioned the speech advisory committee. The speech advisory committee is obviously providing representation to members throughout the country. If a member wants to bring things to the attention of that committee, how do they go about doing that?
Very good question. Work probably through their section representative. Each of we divide the country up into 8 sections, and this will all be available at nfhs.org. They can identify which section they're in, and then it would also be there that they could identify who their speech advisory committee member is, and contact them and work through that angle. If they can't come up with that, if it's a little more difficult, certainly contact me directly, and we can certainly get those concerns, on the agenda of the committee.
Good. So, are there any other things that you'd like this class to know about NFHS or its services, or just your general philosophy
Sure.
of the activity?
The one thing I would like them to know is the importance of the job that they are doing, because I have seen so many students grow, just exponentially from participation in speech, debate, and theater, music, the other areas that we work with, certainly in sports. They are vitally important to the development of young people, and we appreciate everything that they do, and we realize how hard work it is. I did it for 17 years, so I know exactly how much work is involved, but how much they're appreciated, and we just wish them all the best.
Great. Well, we've just been talking to Kent Summers, who has the most direct involvement of the NFHS folks with speech, debate, and theater. He's a resource to you, and certainly has been a great resource to us. So thank you very much, Kent.
Thank you.